welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow. This is the 10th edition, 10 seasons of recognizing excellence, 10 years of identifying champions, and 10 seasons of identifying and pushing your causes that are closest to your heart. I'm Sananda Jayaseelan, and welcome to this very special show here on the Leaders of Tomorrow on ET Now, coming to you live, decoding the budget, the first show where we're going to be talking really about the impact for India's small businesses. And I have two people who are joining me here on the show who need absolutely no introduction. They've joined us previously on the Leaders of Tomorrow to talk about all the reasons that this budget is going to have an impact, and what is the impact it's going to have on India's small businesses and entrepreneurs, and what we can look forward to in the rest of 2022. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time here with us. I want to very quickly introduce our guests. First up, Pawan Goenka, Chairman Designate in Space. We also have joining us on the show, Sumant Sinha, Chairman and MD of ReNew Power. Dr. Goenka, Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for your time here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sananda.
Okay, so let me start off today's conversation by talking about something that's on everyone's minds, given the upcoming elections, the state elections that we're likely to see, but also the situation that we're in, the economic situation that we're in. GST collections, like we've heard from the finance minister, may have been at its all-time high, and the economy is slowly coming back really on track. With all of that being said, do you feel that this has been perhaps a budget that has ticked all boxes, or a budget that was not perhaps so populist, and you were expecting perhaps something completely different? Maybe I could come to you first, Dr. Goenka.
Sunanda, this program is for leaders for tomorrow, of tomorrow. So I want to start off by saying what the FM said at the very beginning of her speech, that this budget is laying out the blueprint for 25 years. And clearly, many of us won't be here at 25 years from now, but the leaders of tomorrow will be here. And therefore, it's very important that the leaders of tomorrow understand the finer points of this budget and what it's trying to do. And I think, as you would have heard whole day on TV, that this is one of those few budgets where, in spite of elections being around the corner, there is nothing which one can call a populist measure. Everything here is driving growth. And many things here will not be giving immediate result in the next 3 months, 6 months, because these are long-term investments that are being more made for making country strong economically, socially, and politically in some sense. So that's the special part about this budget that I like very much. That nothing populist, everything capital driven. As the industry has been saying, that India needs to right now invest in capital expenditure for the country, and many things that have been done which really will have a long-term impact.
Would you agree with that, Mr. Sinha?
Yeah, absolutely, I would agree with it. I think, first of all, it's very hard to disagree with Pawan because he's always right. But I think in this case, he definitely is. Look, I think that the Prime Minister, I think, has shown now the way his economic philosophy works. And he's shown that over multiple budgets now that we've seen. And, he's somebody who eschews the populist handouts. His philosophy always has been one of enablement rather than just to give people something in their hands. And that's why every time budget comes out, various people get up and say, oh, there wasn't anything for this sector or that sector. But that's because the philosophy behind these budgets is to try to actually build the country. It's to try and build India and also go for growth. And in this particular instance, what the government has tried to do is that they've tried to go for growth, not through the demand side, but more from the supply side. And within the supply side, essentially improving the economy's productivity, its overall capacity to produce goods and items, its ability to logistically and infrastructurally move those items from one part to another part, and really focus on enhancing efficiency. So that's really what they've tried to do. And that is why this big allocation for capital for infrastructure development of 35% increase, more than any other part of the economy. So I think that's really where they've tried to focus. And I think there's also this other overarching theme that is coming through, which is greening the economy. And that is something also that you are now seeing coming through in various languages, language and phrases that were used by the FM and different, of course, schemes that they've come out with. And of course, beyond the budget, also all the activity that we see. So I think all in all, I absolutely agree with Pawan that the government definitely has tried to go for a long-term point of view and to drive growth in a very secular and sustainable manner.
I just want to quickly apologize, Mrs. Sinha. My producer has sent an update. Chairman and CEO of ReNew Power, not MD. I want to apologize for that. I just want to come back to you and really talk about one thing. One of the headlines really that everyone was watching for from the finance minister was what she would do and what she would announce by way of supporting small businesses and India's small businesses, because they perhaps have been the hardest hit. One of the things that we've seen is the extension of the emergency credit guarantee scheme that is till March 2023. There's also been an expansion by 50,000 crores. Good news, some would say, for MSMEs, but much more could have been done. It's very mixed in terms of what has been announced for MSMEs. But would you say that this is perhaps the best that could have been done in this situation?
So, Sunanda, I have a view on this, and I have said this several times. There is no doubt that MSMEs are backbone for Indian industry. And without a strong MSME, the Indian industry cannot be strong. Having said that, I don't think we should expect the government to fix everything that needs to be fixed about MSMEs. The role is of government partly the MSMEs themselves, and partly the bigger players in the industry who have to handhold the MSMEs. And therefore, what the government has done in this budget is something that is a very critical situation right now for the MSMEs, which is the fund flow and the working capital. And if you look at the extension of the emergency scheme, I think they are taking care of the fund flow and adding 50,000 crores to that kitty. And when you look at the payment that they have said the 75% payment will be done in 10 days, that's taking care of the working capital to a large extent, which is a big problem for MSMEs. Now, government having said that, now I think the larger industry also has to play the role, and this I've said even last week, of handholding the MSMEs to make them strong. To make them strong in terms of technology, in terms of skill development, in terms of processes that they have to follow to produce world-class component that they, in many cases, supply to the larger industry. And MSMEs themselves have to also look to see how they would play their role in becoming the sort of backbone, the pillar of the Indian industry. So I would say the government has done their part. Of course, one can always say more could be done. There's nothing that one cannot say more can be done. But I think what they've done in the whole overall context of things is good enough for the time being, and the industry needs to play its role.
Okay, I want to drill down further. I know you're saying this is good enough in this situation, but I want to talk about not just the MSMEs, but also the smaller businesses and industries, particularly in the services industries. Now, while there's been some sort of announcement and support for, whether it's your travel and tourism, whether it's your hospitality, eating out, you're seeing people now going out even more despite this third wave. Talk of perhaps a fourth wave, maybe, which could be even worse than the third wave. What happens to the smaller services industries? What happens to the smaller industries? Say, for instance, your beauty parlors, your repair shops, even maybe smaller OEMs. If you could come in on that, and this is open to both of you, of course. What happens to these industries which urgently needed a boost and a leg up and perhaps are not going to see that relief anytime soon?
Sumant, you want to go in first, and then I will add my views.
Please.
So I think. Look, when I was speaking just now, I was talking more from the viewpoint of the supplier industry. A lot of MSMEs are, and I have no disagreement that the sectors that you talked about, that you just mentioned, are the sectors that are in sort of dire need for some kind of propelment for them to continue to move forward. And I think the best thing that can be done for that right now is not to cause disruption in their business. What is happening is this: just when the things start getting to some kind of a normalcy, then again wave comes and again they're back to lockdown and stuff like that. My heart goes out for these businesses because I can kind of see them almost helpless at this point of time. In fact, on Sunday I went to see a movie at PVR, and I was feeling so sad to see 14 people sitting in the hall on a Sunday, and all these people outside trying to sell you popcorn and all, just standing there with no customers. And they definitely need help to get the business back to normal. And I don't really know what can be done except for ensuring that there is no discontinuity in their business by taking a little bit of a risk and not doing lockdowns and trying to get people back in the shops, on the movie halls, in the malls, and so on. Sumant, you want to add how to go about it?
I don't know about Mr. Sinha, but I've forgotten what normal things like going out to watch a movie in a theater even feels like anymore.
No, I agree with you. And also the question of going and getting your haircut at a barber saloon and stuff like that. I sometimes wonder what the people who who work there, how are they making ends meet? And I can imagine that they're having an extraordinarily difficult time through all of this. So I agree that we need to get businesses restarted, and we should try to prevent any more lockdowns and those kinds of disruptions. But of course, those have to be driven by medical advice. So beyond a point, the government can't do much about it as well.
Sure.
And you can't expect them to be lax on medical parameters and put people's lives at risk and so on. So that whole thing about lives versus livelihood, that whole debate that we had earlier comes back. But look, I also don't know what the government can do specifically. They can't get people. They can't just give randomly, distribute money and stuff like that, because after all, how do you give it? Who do you give it to? And so on. So I think the best solution to my mind is to get the economy back on track again. And hopefully now that we are looking at 9% growth in the current year and hopefully another 8% next year, my feeling is that a lot of businesses will now begin to come back again. And with the vaccination program having been done and behind us more or less, and booster shots going on, and hopefully this COVID wave now is a lot milder, maybe this does not recur. And if it does not recur, then let's not worry about it beyond a point. Let's not plan for it. Let's not think, oh, what if this happens? Then what should the government do? Let it happen, and then then we'll see what is the best solution at that point in time. I think in the meantime, the best hope for everybody is that the economy opens up, the economy is doing well, its growth starts picking up, people start being out and about, and hopefully there is pent-up demand. People like us will go and get 2 to 3 haircuts every month just to compensate for not having got haircuts.
I got one 2 days ago.
Yeah, it looks like that. So it's a very well groomed looking. So anyway, the point is that therefore we should, hopefully therefore things will begin to come back and this issue will be behind us.
And so just one more thing I want to add to this, that I have tremendous faith in resilience of a society. And once we have normalcy back, I think everything, I believe, will be back to normal. And the way these people have stood up to this difficult time is actually commendable. That they still have a smile on their face when you go and see them. So I think we'll be okay. I just hope there's no fourth wave and this is it, and we should be okay 3 to 6 months from now.
Sure. I want to talk very quickly sector specific, auto, and what's happening as far as the solar industry is concerned. And first come to the auto industry. Dr. Goenka, I was a part of a conversation earlier today where there were some auto journalists who were talking about the budget, and they said the budget doesn't feel like the budget without the key takeaways from Dr. Goenka. So on behalf of all of them, I want to ask you some questions, and at least one question as far as the auto industry is concerned. The FM announcing that we'll see a shift to use of public transport in urban areas, amongst other things, special mobility zones with zero fossil fuel policy, EV vehicles, thrust on that, continued thrust on that. Are you happy with the announcements that you've seen? Would you have liked to see more perhaps?
Right. Clean energy. sustainable mobility, whether we talk solar panel for generating power or whether we talk batteries for propelling vehicles. That thrust is very clear. And it didn't start today. It's been there now for some time with the PLI schemes, with the FAME benefit, with the GST reduction on these vehicles. And what the budget has done today, in a way, reinforced that trust of the government by talking about the various things that you just mentioned, including zero fossil fuel zones of public transport. Now, zero fossil fuel zones perhaps are some time away. It's going to take some time before we can get to that level. But I think, again, it's the intent that the government has talked about. And the important thing is that that electric mobility now is maturing in India. Again, I have said this many times, the government of India has done its bit already. It's by and large up to the industry and the consumers to bring in the electric vehicle era into India, and it cannot be too soon. Its time is there now. So the budget has just reinforced that, and I'm quite happy to see that that trust being mentioned in the budget. So obviously, there's no specific announcement about it, except for the intent is very important to have been spelled out.
Sure. There was a mention of the PLI schemes, and I just want to bring up that point and talk about really what is happening as far as the PLI scheme for benefiting the solar manufacturing, the solar space. What would you have to say about the announcement that we've heard today from the Finance Minister, Mr. Sinha?
Yeah, what happened is that initially the government had announced 4,500 crores for the solar PLI scheme, which we all knew was a very small number because it would not accommodate more than maybe 8 to 10,000 megawatts of total manufacturing capacity, where actually we required about 30 to 40 or even 50 gigawatts. So we knew all along that the number was very small. And when the bids were solicited, there were bids that went into the tune of about 50,000 megawatts, which showed actually the amount of interest in the sector. And the amount, if all this amount then eventually got established and set up or commissioned, that would essentially position India very well, not just to meet domestic capacity, but also essentially as a potential export alternative to China, and really position India very well in the whole emerging green economy globally. Now, of course, for that we needed therefore the allocation to go up. And the FM has actually done exactly that, which is to increase the allocation to a point now where every single person who applied can actually get the allocation. So now what needs to happen is that everything is teed up. The government just needs to now basically go ahead, make the allocations out, and get people started on setting up the solar manufacturing plants. The good thing is that in this case, the bids have already happened. So, all of that lead time is cut out. And if people get started, then a year and a half or a year from now, we'll have all this capacity coming on stream. So I think it's a very big positive that they've done what they've done. And they're now looking to replicate, of course, the same thing in other areas of the green economy, such as battery manufacturing, electrolyzers as well eventually. Some of those bids have happened, some still need to happen. But we're heading in the direction of creating a good, large manufacturing ecosystem for the entire green economy. And I think that's a very welcome strategic move on the part of the government.
I have one more question as far as...
I just want to add for the leaders of tomorrow. And I've said this many times, that the PLI scheme is a 5-year bridge. And the industry has to understand that the government of India is giving us 5 years to become competitive in 6th year without the benefit of PLI scheme. And therefore, the industry, the leaders of tomorrow, cannot let this 5-year sort of go to waste, in a sense that 6th year they say, now we're not competitive. We have to use this time to remove all the disabilities that we have in our manufacturing, no matter which industry sector you're talking about, which requires us the help of PLI. And I won't go into details of what all needs to be done. It's different for different sector, but I think leaders must keep that in mind, that in year number 6, there is no PLI.
Sure. I'm going to take a quick commercial break. I do have one more question on PLI for the solar space, but back in just a moment. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and you're watching this very special budget edition breaking down the impact of the budget for you, the entrepreneurs. And we have two very special guests who are joining us today to discuss just that, Dr. Pawan Goenka and Sumant Sinha. Gentlemen, we were talking about the PLI scheme just before we took a break. And Mr. Sinha, I want to come back to you and really talk about one more point as far as the PLI scheme is concerned and the solar space is concerned. Not much for renewable energy as compared to the announcements that have come really for solar manufacturers. A bit of a disappointment for you?
No, not really. I think, people like us are also looking at solar manufacturing because that's the natural thing for us to do now. So I think we're perfectly fine. And, the reality is, as I said earlier, Sunanda, that the government is doing a lot of things for our sector. It's just that some of it gets announced in the budget, but a lot of action happens outside the budget as well. So we have to look at the totality of what the government is doing, what their approach is. The Prime Minister has announced massive targets when he was at Glasgow in COP26. Those, the government is working on. They have introduced, a lot of changes on the transmission network side, on how pricing is done, on trying to reform the distribution utilities. So all of that has to be considered as well. So I would not say that we should just look at the budget and see whether something is announced there or not, and then, trying to, start getting happy or sad. Because we also know, by the way, in conversations with the government, that there are so many other things that are in the works as well. And those will get announced whenever is the right time and whenever the government has done the preparatory work needed for them. And those could happen outside the budget as well.
Okay. How do you read, though, the basic custom duties as far as imported solar modules are concerned? That's been increased, 40-odd%. Some concern from industry, we've seen a lot of comments and reactions coming in post the budget saying this will definitely have an impact on tariffs.
I think overblown because the government had telegraphed their intentions to do this a very long time ago. Okay. And therefore, all the bids that have been happening since the announcement of this, of the BCD, a year ago is when the government told us that the BCD would come in on 1st April of 2022. So from a year ago, all the bids that have been happening in solar have already accounted for this higher customs duty because all those modules are going to be imported after this year, 1st April. And so the higher tariffs are already there in the market. And the reality is that today solar is so much cheaper than anything else. The cost of solar had gone down to about 2 rupees or 225. So with the added customs duty also, the cost will be maybe 250, 260, something in that range. Compared to anything else, coal is at 4.5, 5 rupees. So solar is so cheap right now that even with the additional customs duty, and by the way, I should also tell that GST was increased from 5% to 12% on all renewable energy projects literally a couple of months ago. So that also had a very, very big impact, by the way. But despite the GST increase, despite the BCD increase, the reality is that solar is still going to be very significantly subsidized and therefore still very attractive.
Sure. Gentlemen, my last few questions as we're running out of time on today's live budget discussion for India's entrepreneurs. First, I want to talk about unemployment, and that's a big concern for India's small businesses. A lot of people, losing jobs. The finance minister in her announcement today said the government has done what it could. Yes, unemployment touching about 6-odd%, but much, much lower compared to what you had seen, a few years ago at about 11, 13-odd%. 6% is still, it's high, but not as high as what it was. Very quickly, maybe one or two things that you would like to see, one or two things that you think the government should definitely do if we have to ensure that we have jobs really coming back into the economy.
So you're right that if you look at the job creation, of course, there is a second order effect because of infrastructure development and all that create jobs undoubtedly. But there's no direct initiatives that have come into the budget that create jobs. And my wish, since you asked for a wish, is that the GST Council should take a look at some very focused rationalization of GST for those industries where demand increase is going to lead to higher number of jobs. For example, leather and footwear could be one of those industries where the demand can go up. It will create a lot of employment. Textile creates a lot of employment. So what can we do to increase consumption in these 2 or 3 or 4 employment-heavy industries that GST Council can look at. And I think we do have some fiscal room, given very buoyant GST collection that FM talked about. And given that the budget itself has taken a fairly conservative view of 10% increase in taxes overall for next year, I think there is room for some GST rationalization. And again, thrust specifically on job-creating industries.
Sure. Mr. Sinha?
Well, I think, first of all, the PLI scheme is a very big positive. That will create a lot of manufacturing jobs. So I think that is something that should be implemented forthwith. The second thing is, I think there are still very large parts of the government, the large parts of the corporate sector that are still in government hands. I think some degree of privatization to let those companies grow faster, hopefully therefore also become centers of job creation, that would also be useful. And then, of course, there are certain sectors of the economy, such as tourism and so on, for example, that are also big employers of people. And I think those are some of the sectors where perhaps the government could give some additional thrust. So I think those are the things that I would do if I had to take a decision on some of these matters.
Okay, I'm going to unfortunately put both of you on the spot as we're ending today's live discussion and ask you to rate the budget. We're journalists, we love numbers. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how would you perhaps like to rate today's budget? Mr. Sinha, I'll come to you first.
Sunanda, we've learned our lesson a long time ago that as corporates, we only rate the budget at 9 or 10. Okay. So therefore, I think we've stopped rating the budget totally. I think the only thing I would say is that the budget is a good one. It's and for all the reasons that you've already discussed. Sure. It's eschewed populism, it's growth oriented, it's capex oriented, it's focusing on the long-term levers of the economy. So I think for all of those reasons, it's a sensible budget. And I think that's really where I would stop.
Sensible budget?
Yeah. From the dicto for me, in fact, for the last 15 years, the media has been trying to get me to rate the budget. I've never tried. And just like Sumant, I would say it's a very good budget. I think it ticks almost all the boxes that the industry was looking for. There's always things that one can talk about that the budget falls short of. There never will be a budget which everybody will be completely happy with. But I for one, am very happy with the budget that was announced today, and it was done very well.
On that very, very optimistic and positive note, it's time to sign off for tonight, gentlemen. Appreciate once again you taking the time to join us here live on the Leaders of Tomorrow.
Thank you, Sunanda.
Thank you, Sunanda.
Thank you. Completely out of time then on tonight's episode. Our contact details will come up in just a moment. But if you have any feedback for us, do head on over to our website, leadersoftomorrow.co.in. Thanks for watching.